watched Footlight Parade. Woo! Actually, I rewatched it because I watched it many years ago and moderately enjoyed it then. And yeah, it's not bad. It's from 1933, and it's one of a string of musicals. Actually, musicals. It's a musical picture, a picture with music in it. There's a bunch of famous ones and there's a whole bunch of not famous ones. The famous ones are 42nd Street and The Gold Diggers of 33 and stuff like that. But this was actually one of the firsts, and I do remember it as being good, and I watched it and yep, still good. In 1933 in Hollywood, they were churning them out. I mean, the churning movies out. I actually looked up for stats for this movie, for the people in this movie. James Cagney, who was in it, did 4 other movies that year. Joan Blondell, who was in it, did 7 other movies that year. Keeler only 2 other movies. Robert Powell, 8 other movies. The director had 4 other movies. The second director, Busby Berkeley, had 5 other movies that year. That's churning it out. I mean, now a director takes 2 years to make 1 movie. An actor makes, maybe if he's really, really busy, 2 movies a year max. Usually a little less than that. If you're lucky, if you get 1. So this is churning it out, and I was worried when I was going to rewatch it is that it's just bad, and I was pleasantly surprised it wasn't bad. At the bottom of my list it says there's a cat. Yeah, there's a cat. It's actually the first of a whole genre in. It's not actually the first of a whole genre, but it's one of the first of that genre of Broadway people. They don't actually call them Broadway people, but they are Broadway people putting on a show. And the movie's about people putting on a theatrical show for whatever reason, and yeah, this is one of those. It starts with because this is 1933. They've only been doing talkies for 4 years. Can you imagine that? 4 years earlier, they were doing silent movies. They're now doing talkies, singing, dancing, all cat-included talkies. And I've watched some movies a little earlier than this, and they are really bad because they just don't know what to do with scenes and sounds and stuff like that. So by 33, you think, maybe. This tells the story of a producer, a theatrical music producer, and it actually tells you what a producer actually does, and very few things actually ever do. This one does. They show him deciding on the subject, getting in the music, going to the dance director, the rehearsals, staging it, the costumes not, but then actually getting it pushed onto a stage. All of that. That's what a producer does. And they show that. And it's very interesting. And I think this film, because it shows this entire process from people that are actually from the Broadway, because James Cagney and a bunch of the others are actually Broadway actors brought in a couple of years earlier, because suddenly everybody wanted talkies. So you need somebody who can talk. So you go to Broadway. They can sing and they can talk there. So you bring them to Hollywood and they can do the singing and the talking there. And what are we going to sing and talk about? Well, they're talking about doing Broadway productions, of course. Kind of obvious. But I think it is an interesting document, and it shows a little bit stylized, but it shows how these inner workings of these things work. And it shows they work so bloody hard. They're just nothing but work, and it's unbelievable. And the way that Cagney powerhouses all over everybody and produces them up the wazoo. that's an interesting view of little window into that time. I mean, is it going to be exactly the way that was? Maybe not, but I think the mood, the way that they expect the dancers to just on the whim of the producer, he says, you now have to stay here. You're not going home for 3 days. You're going to stay here and practice. And they put up with that. I think that it's a little bit of a hyperbole, but maybe not that much. I think that in Broadway, they do that sort of stuff to keep things secret so other people don't find out, which is the part of the plot here. The thing that this movie suffers from a little bit is that it has a bit of too many storylines. And I think, and I was thinking about it, and I think it's because from the silent era, which came from an earlier era of just short reels of like 10 minutes of movie, and you do a little story in 10 minutes, and then you get 2 reels of movie, and you get 2 times 10 minutes, so you do 2 stories in that, in a combined story, and then etc until you have like 10 reels, and then you have like 5 or 10 stories that you're telling in that thing. And that's the legacy they get from the silent era into the talkie era. Too many storylines. And because this is a thing being churned out, if a storyline doesn't work out, they can't really dump it. Basically whatever they filmed, you're seeing. I mean, they did a couple of takes, I'm sure, but if there's a scene that they filmed, then we'll see a version of that in the movie. And you notice this the most with the Ruby Keeler storyline. Ruby Keeler is actually, I think she's hired to be a tap dancer. She's, I suppose, a wonderful tap dancer. I don't know anything about tap. It's not my, I like dancers, but tap doesn't really do much for me. And I have to say, every time she dances, she sort of dances like this. And I'm sort of going, girls, just stand up, please. I mean, really. and so she's not my favorite. And I have to say, in the other movies that I saw her in, she doesn't act very well either. And singing is also not great. But she tickles somebody's fancy, I suppose. And in this movie, she actually has a couple of scenes where she actually acts. It's the only movie I ever saw her act in. But it's part of the storyline. She starts off as a secretary in the production company. She's behind the typewriter, and she's dowdy, and the glasses, and the hat, and then she's supposed to become interested in a guy, and then interested in maybe he is supposed to talk her into becoming pretty. However, she has the 2 scenes with her as the dowdy girl and the guy with Powel, who is a crooner. He's a charming crooner, so should be. These scenes, they don't work. I mean, it's the best she ever did, but they don't really work. And I think the director realized that and decided to just fizzle out the storyline. So they literally fizzle it out. She's turned into a pretty girl pretty quickly, and then they let her do the tapping thing in the many production numbers. And I think she's in all 4 production numbers. So yeah, the Powell storyline of the crooner. This is the moment where you realize, hey, this is 1933. The Hays Code didn't start until a year or so later. And while you don't notice that much in this movie, Powell, this character, actually has a sugar mommy. A wealthy lady is sponsoring him to become a singer in on the stage. And they never say what the relationship is, but it's implied. And I think that's probably when the Hays Code comes, they can't imply that anymore. The other thing that's interesting is also, and they don't mention that at all, this is Prohibition time. Prohibition is also another, I think a year or 2 to go, and they never show alcohol on screen, but the James Cagney character and the gal with him get absolutely roaring drunk, and so he arrives drunk at somebody else's house. But they never tell you this is Prohibition era, so they were getting drunk very, very illegally. You don't notice anything from the fact that this is pre-code. I mean, the implication of the sugar mommy, and there's one of the production numbers where she marries him. They marry. They are at Honeymoon Hotel, and they go to bed, as in they get into bed together, and then the light goes out, and then there's a picture of a baby. That is as bad as it gets. I mean, yeah. Maybe the cat number is a little bit saucy, but this is not anything that's gonna make anybody faint nowadays, or not even then, I think. And the next storyline is the one of the secretary, the other lady secretary, that is in the production company, who is in love with the Cagney character, played by Joan Blondell. Joan Blondell is another one of those people who came from Broadway to Hollywood. I think they chartered a couple of really big buses, and a lot of famous people were on board of those buses. And she sort of ended up in the actual Broadway song and dance crew. She's only moderately song and dance, but she's very good. This is not the best movie for her to see. She has done better movies. This is because Cagney is such a powerhouse. Basically, he runs this show. This is the Cagney show, and not in a bad way. This is good. The energy he brings to keep this thing going. Pace. It's mesmerizing, and this in combination with the really tight direction, for a cookie cutter thing that they're churning out, everybody seems to be bringing their A game. The director, the only point the director failed is with the Keeler plot line, where he just lets it fizzle out. Other stuff, he realizes that Powel is also not a strong actor, so he does do the sugar mommy thing, and it just sort of doesn't make it a big feature anymore. He instead lets Cagney come up and do his thing, and he's got like 5 subplots going just for him. He is being cheated by his partner. There's an ex-wife trying to get money out of him. He's got a new girlfriend who's also a gold digger. There is the secretary's in love with him, and he has to make these production numbers. And these production numbers are interesting as well. And that's the actual plot of the story, is these prologues. And Peanut Gallery goes, huh? Yeah. This is the only movie I've ever heard of these things in. I've never heard them since. It seems to be a prologue is a single stage song or dance that is put on before to warm up the audience before a show, maybe theater or other vaudeville, because it's basically vaudeville. But here, because the talkies have hit, they're trying to get the cinema owners to still pay for prologues to prologue before their movies, and trying to make that make sense. It, of course, doesn't make sense, and this is why I think that if it ever actually existed, it doesn't exist anymore, because it's very hard to put on. And in part of the plots, Cagney sort of promises one of these cinema owners to put on 3 different prologues at 3 different theaters on the same night. And that's where you get the three production numbers at the end of in quick succession. As a plot point it goes, this is not the bestest plot in the world. What do you expect, But this is a very watchable movie, and I'm going to actually talk about the production numbers in a bit, because they are interspersed, but they are separate, and even with a separate director, because they got Busby Berkeley for the production numbers, whereas Bacon did the actual storyline. The main story is interesting for a couple of other things, historical things that are interesting to watch. There is a scene of all these girls in nightwear because they're staying over, and that's interesting just to see. There's a couple of funny scenes. One is an interesting scene where they're taking auditions for lady singers, because they're looking a singer to star next to Powel, who was already the crooner, so they need a lady. And they sing. It's a question of a little bit. The girl sings, it's not good. Next girl sings, and then comes a lady who sings in a slightly more operatic style than they were singing. They were singing pretty operatically. It is 1930s. They're singing a sort of a operetta kind of style, and the difference to my ear is minute. Yet the lady is older. She is 10 years older than anybody else there, so I noticed that. But apparently to them, the style of this lady is so much different than the style of the other of the songs that they're looking for, and they're going, "Are you kidding?"
It's like old-fashioned.
And my ears. Yeah, I think she's probably singing more opera, whereas they're looking for operetta. And to my ear, that's pretty close. So they're pulling faces on this lady, which I think was completely uncalled for. But okay, this thing is full of jokes like that. There's also when they were doing auditions for the Powel character, for the crooner, or he was just go ahead and sing, and he was supposed to do a duet, but they were still looking for the girl, so they had no girl. So the dance instructor, the dance choreographer, steps in, and this is a pudgy guy with a cigar sticking out of his mouth, and they stand in this romantic pose together with the guy with the singing, and while the other one puffs in his face and does the girl singing lines. It's hilarious. This thing is so full of all these little things happening. And the first production number, there's 4 of them in this thing. I think at least the last 3 are directed by Busby Berkeley, and the cat number maybe not, but maybe it is. Oddly enough, on the credits when the movie starts, Busby Berkeley is fully credited, but on IMDb he's not. So I think because in minutes he directed too little of it, that they think he probably, I don't know. Anyway, the cat number is actually not in the finale. The other 3 numbers are in the finale, because 4 numbers in the finale, it's a lot. There are like 3-4 minutes each, and it's a lot. The cat number they actually put in the middle of the story as a dress rehearsal. And you just get to see in the entire number, which is a great. I think it's just smart writing. You want to not put everything at the end, but performances are always at the end. So what do you do with it? You stick it there, and it sounds very, but that's so very normal. But in 1933, they're still discovering all of that. They're still working on how to make that work. I also said earlier that this is not a musical as such. It is a movie with music in it, about music, because they only have the 4 tunes of the 4 production numbers, and they use those to do all the other music. So they're pretty good numbers. So I hope you don't get sick of them, because you'll be hearing them a lot. They're pretty catchy. the cat number so is in the middle, and it's okay. I actually don't think that's Ruby Keeler. I think that's later because that's before her plotline gets there. Never mind. They're wearing costumes. Interesting thing is, of course, there's a cat. So because the producer thought of a cat number because he found a cat, then hands off sent cats to the choreographer, who puffs on his thing and goes, "It's a cat. What do I do about that?" And he said, and then the producer says, "Make it into a number. Find some music." They don't ever write their own music. They always go to a library of music, which is interesting as well. I've seen that in other movies, that the musics are sort of standard musics, and you pull them, and then you choreograph a number to it, and then I suppose somebody does something with costumes. That part they don't show. But the choreography they're showing, so they're showing this puffy guy puffing on his thing, doing cat walks and and stuff like that. It's really hilarious. And then once you actually get to the production numbers, other than they exist in the show, they don't have actually much to do with the original story. So the fact that it's a different director is absolutely no problem at all. It's a simple that they're 4 minutes of something else, and if you've ever seen the Busby Berkeley direction of these bodies moving in space, and sometimes filmed from above, and through the going on a crane through the legs, and everybody going in a circle, and that's what he's known for, and apparently already known for. I haven't checked if this is his first movie. I don't think so, because one of the production numbers is one of lots of water, and that with underwater shots and dolly shots, and I mean everything they use now that isn't digital they used then, and it's amazing. And I think what attracted people in it is that it is oddly satisfying to watch a symmetrical thing move in a symmetrical way in space, and then realize that it is young girls and young guys doing these things. I think that it is also very much a look of 1930s photo art. That's what he was doing. Than on the art side, but on the rest side there's some music and there's dancing. The Cats number is I have written down here, was it meant to be sexy? I think it probably was then. It's more cutesy. Yeah, that's the most old-fashioned one of nah. I think that's the most old-fashioned one of the bunch. The second one is the Honeymoon Hotel, so that's the first of the actual performances. Honeymoon Hotel. That's pretty cringe. 1930s were pretty cringe. Also pretty cringe is the black servant caricature that's in there. Good is that there's actually a bit of stop motion animation in it, which I think is Busby Berkeley again. That was one of the art things they did in the 30s for moving pictures. So he did everything there. The water feature thing, I'm not sure what the thing was called, which was just a duet between Keeler and Powell, with a lot of swimming, where Keeler goes into the water, swims around, and they are like not mermaids in the fishtail type, but water sprites, and the clothing they wear, because of the black and white, is such that it looks like they're naked with a little bit of lily pads in certain places, which I think probably is also because it's pre-code.
It would be his first.
It is, okay, his first. So they gave him a lot of... he must have done something like shorts before this, because that water... this water thing, that looks like it was very expensive. I mean, there was slides and big pool and underwater shots swimming around with the girls. I mean, really, that's a lot. The last one of the night is interesting because the plot comes back again. Producer Cagney runs into the dressing room of the last guy who's to go on stage now, and he says, "I'm a drunk." Turns out his girl poured alcohol in the guy, and he can't go on stage. So, who has to go on stage? Cagney himself. Because Cagney, even though he's famous for having played a lot of bad guys in a lot of baddies in this period, he was actually a song and dance man. He called himself a song and dance man. He came from Broadway as a song and dance man, and this number proves it so well. I mean, Ruby Keeler is very popular apparently, but she's no light to Cagney. He out-taps her, he out-moves her, he outdoes everything her. Not in a mean way. He does dance with her, but you know. The bad news about this number is it's called Shanghi Lil. Peanut gallery just turned green. And Keeler is Shanghi Lil, with it's just a little bit of makeup, that's all. So she plays Oriental. That's bad news. The good news is that there's a shot, the thing is in a bar in Shanghai, and there's a shot of the bar following the entire bar, with people behind it, and there is a black guy, there is a Jewish guy, there's a lot of girls, and the ones at the bar, I wouldn't know if they were Oriental, because everybody's having that kind of makeup and it becomes really hard to see. But I think earlier there's a pan where they go where he walks through the bar, and there's a lady sitting there, and I think she's definitely Oriental. So we have everything there. So the fact that she is doing Yellowface, she is the star of this. She is there to tap, and that is they all did it. But there is a black guy and a Jewish guy. They are there. In the 50s, they are not there. In the 30s, they are there. Yeah. And that's interesting. And so not great. The scene turns into a long crowd scene, and because his character's in Shanghai because he's a sailor, and then he has to go join his sailing group and march off, and all of a sudden you have an entire platoon of sailors marching with guns and going, oh my god, what's going on? And then it turns into an FDR rally for, okay, wow. And I was going, oh wow, I have to look this up, because wasn't he elected around this time or just before, or just when was this? And actually, he's already elected at this point. He's already in office for about half a year. This comes out in the summer, and he's been in office since what is it, May or something? Since January or something like that. And so this is not a rally to get him voted, but I think it's a rally for stop of the end of Prohibition, for the New Deal stuff. That's what I think is a rally for. It's very interesting to see. So they spliced it in. This is not the first time I've seen this, because I've seen them splice in stuff, political stuff in a lot of these, especially these fluffy nonsense musical thingies. They stuff this in here. So I wasn't too surprised. I remember it from last time as well. But it's kind of weird where they go from Shanghai, from a love story between a sailor and a gal, to suddenly a rally.
But it's political, so it's not vaudeville. But the vaudeville concept is that you constantly have a new scene. And it's something new. Yeah. So now we're having a love scene, now we're having a parade, now we're having
but we're having
brawl.
We're having it all in, because the brawl is also in here. You missed the brawl. It's also in here. It's earlier. So they do everything in this thing. This one basically set the bar for, or set the standard for a bunch of these movies. They kept, after they did 42nd Street, which is also with Keeler and with Blondell and with Powell. Only person who goes somewhere else is Cagney. They do like 4 or 5 really successful of these, and then they do like 100 that are moderate. I'm sure they made their money back. Moderately successful. They kept a part of Hollywood in existence for a long while. And you know what? This one is definitely worth seeing. This is a very very viewable movie, because it doesn't rely on anything you don't know. It whatever you need, it explains in very short terms, but it explains it. And the few things you didn't know about, you're not going to notice, because you wouldn't notice about the Prohibition, because they don't really mention it, or the Pre-Code, because they don't know it, but there's nothing there. And some of these movies from this time very much rely on you knowing the social norms of the time. This one doesn't, because it assumes that you don't know anything about Broadway. So they sort of put in enough there for you to hold on to, because they assume that you don't know. And the power of the sheer power of Cagney, combined with Blondell, who was always very good at being a supporting actress. They take care of any other lesser actors. There's lots of, Powell and Keeler are not great actors. They sing fine. He sings fine, or great, I don't know. And she dances fine and sings the. But that's what they're there for. They're there for to be the furniture, basically, and.
The whole scene, all dancing furniture.
Yeah, and once Cagney leaves this kind of movies, and they stuck with just Blondell and maybe somebody else, Blondell can do it. She can do it too. She just can't dance as good as Cagney. He's really good. This is an enjoyable movie. This one's just good. This one should be on your list of movies to watch. Keeping in mind that it is always a bit of fluff. It is not FDR Rally notwithstanding. It is a bit of fluff. But it's well executed fluff. Fluff with A-game, everybody there. The editor, the music choices, all the things they could have done wrong, they didn't do wrong. So what more could you want? Yeah, this is good. And that is my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.